Well, the other day I was looking through my DVD collection, thinking about what video to do next, and I realized I've talked about a lot of the classic swashbuckling adventure movies, like Robin Hood, Zorro, Captain Blood, but I haven't talked about what might be the greatest swashbuckling adventure movie of the modern era. Pirates of the Caribbean, The Curse of the Black Pearl. Now, The Curse of the Black Pearl was made by Disney. It was based off of the ride of Pirates of the Caribbean. You know, the classic Disneyland ride that combined classic pirate antics with a sense of humor. And Disneyland rides are actually kind of a difficult thing to adapt because you don't have to look any further than the two, maybe three botched attempts at adapting the Haunted Mansion to have proof of that. But Pirates of the Caribbean, like the Haunted Mansion, is difficult to adapt because it has two very different tones happening at the same time. You have, on the one hand, your classic pirate antics, right? Your swashbuckling adventure scenes, but you also have this kind of tongue-in-cheek sense of humor about it, where Walt Disney really wanted to encapsulate what maybe isn't the most historically accurate depiction of pirates, but it's what popular culture and movies like Treasure Island depict pirates as these kind of lovable scalawags that do have a dark side, and they're not good guys, but they're just so carefree and lighthearted and fun that there's just such a good sense of adventure, and when you go on that ride, that's what you walk away with. So when it comes to adapting Pirates of the Caribbean, you could really go two ways about it. You could do a more historically accurate period piece with pirates in the Caribbean, or you could go a bit more tongue-in-cheek, kind of like what Disney did with its depiction of Robin Hood, and really play up the fun lightheartedness of it and kind of parody it in some ways. But producer Jerry Bruckheimer and director Gore Verbinski kind of did both while crafting this film, and I think that's why Pirates of the Caribbean has endured as a franchise for so long, even if the movies, quality-wise, have kind of fallen off a cliff. I think it's because the ideas and execution of this first movie is so good that, yeah, of course this is a billion-dollar franchise. But let's start at the beginning, because Pirates of the Caribbean is, of course, about pirates in the Caribbean. It's kind of self-explanatory, but we don't really start with pirates. We actually start with a young lady named Elizabeth Swan, who's the governor of Port Royal's daughter. So she's this upper-class lady with dreams of the sea and pirates and adventure. She wants more than just her boring life, which is kind of a classic Disney princess archetype, and she's played by Keira Knightley. But then you have Will Turner, and Will Turner, played by Orlando Bloom, he's a blacksmith. He's lower class. His father was a pirate, but then he was kind of lost at sea as a boy. He was taken in by Elizabeth, and so that's how they kind of know each other. They have this very flirtatious relationship, but he's below her status, so they can't really do anything about it. Moreover, Elizabeth is about to marry the Commodore of the Navy. So yeah, things aren't exactly looking up for Will until we get the wild card of the movie, Captain Jack Sparrow, played by Johnny Depp. And he's the character that just stole this franchise and ran, because he is such a fascinating character in this movie that they really don't capitalize on as much in the later movies. The later movies, he just kind of becomes more of a cartoon caricature of himself, whereas in this movie he's an actually interesting character. He's a pirate, yes. He was the captain of the Black Pearl, his ship that was mutinied against him and then marooned him on some island that he ended up escaping from, and he's just kind of been getting on by the skin of his teeth ever since. But when he arrives in Port Royal, he immediately starts shaking things up because he needs a ship to go after the Black Pearl, to get his ship back, because that's really all he cares about. He wants his ship back. He wants to be captain again. And that's a motivation that, even if he is a pirate and he's a bit of a scoundrel and he may be on the bad side of the law, we can still identify with somebody took something that was yours and ran off with it, turned on you, and now you want to get it back. That's kind of a universal human desire, and we can get on board with that. Well, of course, the story is not that simple. This is a 2.5-hour movie. This is a pretty long movie, especially for a first in a franchise. Usually the first movie in a franchise like this, where they didn't know they were going to get sequels, is usually kind of a short, tight, self-contained story, but no, not Pirates of the Caribbean. This is a pretty sprawling adventure, and I, for one, welcome this, because whenever I want to pop in a good pirate adventure, I want it to take some time, and I want it to go to different locations and meet different characters and all that good stuff. And the Curse of the Black Pearl really delivers on that. You see Jack get arrested, you see all the pirates attacking Port Royal, and in the midst of that, Elizabeth gets captured by the pirates, so now Will needs to go get her back, and well, Jack has his own motives for going after the Black Pearl, but if he can team up with Will to commandeer a ship to go after the Black Pearl, whether or not Elizabeth survives is immaterial to him. But now he has a first mate that's equally motivated. They get a ship, they go after the Black Pearl, and the adventure is on. But before I actually go and talk about that adventure, I want to bring up something, and it's the sheer amount of references, both to the ride Pirates of the Caribbean, which this movie has many, probably more than any of the sequels, which is weird because there's so many different things in the ride that don't appear in this first movie that you could bring in the later movie. But here there are many. You see the dog with the keys guarding the jail cell. You see when they get to the island of Tortuga to find a crew to man this ship. You see so many references to the ride because one of the biggest show scenes in the ride is the island of Tortuga, the Turtle Island, the headquarters of piracy in the Caribbean. And it's here where we see Scarlet, the pirate lady from the ride. We see the man laying down with the pigs. And there's several other little details that I can't remember right now, but yeah, they're in the ride too. But what this movie also references, aside from the ride, are those other classic swashbuckling adventure movies like Robin Hood, like Captain Blood. And that's really apparent in both the casting and styling of Orlando Bloom's character, where he does look like an Errol Flynn or Douglas Fairbanks type with the very small mustache, the sideburns. He just looks like he fits that mold perfectly. Much more than Jack Sparrow. Again, Jack Sparrow is kind of the wild card. He's not really based on anything that I can tell aside from Keith Richards, which I guess he kind of modeled his mannerisms and his attitude off of. But I think that is what makes Jack Sparrow stand out so much in this movie, where you're surrounded by all these memorable pirates. But Jack Sparrow really was the standout character, and part of that's Johnny Depp's performance, part of that is the costume design on him, because that is such a memorable look. But also a big part of that is the writing for Jack Sparrow in this movie, because he is Bugs Bunny. He's mischievous. He's the wild card, like I said before. He's not really the hero. He's not really the villain. The hero, you could say, is Will Turner and Elizabeth Swann, depending on what scene they're in. They're the heroes of the story. They're the virtuous ones. And obviously Captain Barbossa, who I will talk about in a little bit, is the villain. But Jack Sparrow doesn't really fit the mold in any of these. He can be virtuous when he wants to be. He can be incredibly selfish and even villainous when he wants to be. And he walks that line so well where you're always interested in what he's going to be. Now let's talk about Captain Barbossa and what's going on the Black Pearl while our heroes are trying to rescue Miss Swan. And that is that many years ago when Jack was still captain of the Black Pearl, Captain Barbossa was his first mate, and they had this crew, and they were all a bunch of pirates, and they stole this Aztec gold from this secret cave, and they loved it. They were so happy about it, but then it cursed them. Except for Jack, who was like, well, maybe we don't take this gold. It might be cursed. So then they mutinied and marooned him on the island, but Jack ended up being right because everybody who stole that gold got cursed, and as a result they become skeletons when the moon is out, and they can never die, but they can never drink, they can never eat, they don't feel anything, they're just hollow corpses, they're the living dead. And this whole sequence on the Black Pearl while Geoffrey Rush as Captain Barbossa is telling Elizabeth Swann all this exposition, it's handled so well, so masterfully, where it doesn't feel like exposition because you're visually seeing it in real time. The moon is coming out, all the crew are turning into skeletons before her very eyes, and then even Captain Barbossa becomes a skeleton and is talking to her. And before I talk about the special effects of the sequence, which are incredible, I want to talk about Captain Barbossa for a little bit, because he may be my favorite character in this movie. Yeah, Jack is great, and he's probably the smartest man in the room in any given situation, even though he doesn't look like it or act like it, and that is the charm of Jack Sparrow. Geoffrey Rush as Captain Barbossa is such a cartoonishly over-the-top depiction of a pirate, the first kind of pirate image that comes into your head, and the kind of voice that comes into your head when you think pirate, like Blackbeard or Long John Silver. Captain Barbossa is that to a T, and he does a great job of delivering a lot of exposition in this over-the-top pirate voice and pirate mannerisms. But for some reason, I don't know if it's the skeleton crew curse or just the heightened reality of this period drama that involves pirates, it weirdly works, and it weirdly fits in all of this because this movie leans so much on pirate iconography in general, and the fact that there's so many references to both the ride and that Errol Flynn era pirate adventure movie, that yeah, having a cartoon of a pirate captain be your bad guy, it weirdly fits. And that is something that is probably consistently done in a lot of these pirates movies. The villain is usually the most interesting and fun to watch part of them, whether it's Barbossa or Davy Jones or Blackbeard himself. But now let's talk about the effects, because this movie has some groundbreaking digital effects when it comes to the skeleton crew and the transformations and seeing them move and seeing CGI skeletons fight real people on set. The coordination and choreography of all that is super impressive. And above all else, the CGI still holds up pretty well. Yeah, there's some shots where you're like, oh yeah, I can kind of tell that's CGI. But if you just kind of sit back and take it in, it really doesn't distract. This movie came out in 2003. That's only 1 year after Attack of the Clones. And this movie looks so much better than Attack of the Clones. But I think that's because this movie actually doesn't use a lot of CGI. Most of the effects in this movie are not digital, they're practical. They actually built these sets, these pirate ships, and they had different versions of the pirate ships for different scales and for different shots, right? So they had some miniatures, they had some really big miniatures, and then they had a couple that were actual life-size pirate ships. On top of that, a lot of the stunt work and fight choreography, that's all in camera. They actually brought back the classic sword fight duel that, because of movies like Captain Blood and Zorro and Robin Hood, just had become ingrained into pop culture depictions of pirates. They gotta draw their cutlasses and start hacking away, and I love that. I'm here for a good sword fight, and this movie has two of them. The first between Jack and Will Turner in his blacksmith shop at the beginning of the movie, and the second at the end of the movie between Jack, Will, Barbossa, and some of the other pirates, the big climactic sword fight. That's also super impressive, very well choreographed, and again, mostly in camera choreography, aside from the little bits where Jack or Barbossa turn into skeletons. And it was when I was watching this again, I realized that not only is this referencing classic pirate movies, but the skeletons versus real human sword fighting actually harkens back to the old Harryhausen movies, like the one-on-one skeleton fight in The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad. I do see some parallels between that and the Jack Barbossa fight at the end of the movie, but then when you see all the skeleton crew going after all the British Navy crew on the deck of a ship, that reminds me of the Harryhausen sequence from Jason and the Argonauts, where he had multiple stop-motion skeletons going after crew members, and the amount of time and effort that took to animate and coordinate and time with the live action footage, I think is actually pretty similar to what they ended up doing with CGI. But you know how the story goes. They go and rescue Elizabeth, they have their big sword fights, they have their big ship battles, and all the action and pirate adventure that you would want out of a movie like this. It all goes down in spectacular fashion, and I love every minute of it. Then the movie kind of winds down and you realize, oh wait, no, Jack still has to pay for his crimes, and he's arrested again, and he's about to be hanged. And the last scene of this movie is Jack's execution. But then you see Will now dressed up as, I'm not exactly sure. I know this is a reference to something, I just can't place it. It might be a reference to D'Artagnan in The Three Musketeers. It also might be a reference to Captain Blood. He had a very similar hat with a feather in it. Or it might be a reference to the Tyrone Power pirate movie called The Black Swan. There was also kind of a similar cape and hat combination in that movie. I'm not sure. If you know exactly what this is referencing, let me know in the comments. I know it's something, because that's too specific an outfit to not be a reference to some kind of pirate thing out there. But of course, Will is not going to just let Jack hang. He coordinates this rescue attempt with some of the other crew that they gathered in Tortuga. And yeah, Jack Sparrow escapes. Will is officially a pirate now. He's given up his blacksmithing to go pursue a life at the sea with his love, Elizabeth Swann. And I guess everybody lives happily ever after. Until the next movie, but that's a video for another day. And that's really all I have to say about Pirates of the Caribbean, The Black Pearl. It's a fantastic film. There's really not a lot wrong with it, and for a modern take on the pirate genre, which really hasn't existed for the past 40 or 50 years before this movie came out, it did a great job of reminding us why those pirate movies from long ago still hold up remarkably well. Just captivated an audience back in the day, and it showed Hollywood that yeah, pirate movies, they're not dead, even if Disney is trying to kill it again. Let me know in the comments, what do you think about Pirates of the Caribbean, The Black Pearl? Or better yet, what is your favorite pirate movie whatever. It could be from the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise. It could be from the older pirate movies. Name your pick. Whatever one's your favorite, let me know in the comments. If you like this video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe for more content, and hit the notification bell to be notified every time I upload a video. And as always, I'm Colby. This is my nerdy talk, and I'll see you in the next video.